We're living through a real cultural revolution. We've heard this term cultural revolution. We think of it in terms of Mao's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. But there's been a cultural revolution going on in America. How do we know? It's when you step out and you realize suddenly that you're not living in quite the same country, that America is a different country than you remember it, different country than it was, not just when you were a kid, not just a generation or 2 generations ago, but just not so long ago, a few years ago. Now, I was looking over social media, as I do every day, and I was looking at some documentation of how the Federal Reserve, now, this is one of the most staid, somber, dull organizations in America. It's made up largely of bespectacled, pencil-wielding economists. And the Federal Reserve is promoting critical race theory. The Federal Reserve is having seminars on white supremacy and structural racism. Now, these are guys who normally worry about interest rates, they worry about debt, they worry about different types of ratios. And yet, they too have opened the door to this racialization of everything. And I literally mean everything. We might have thought at the beginning that the left will try to grab a hold of the large megaphones of culture, so they're going to try to have woke ideology permeate the media, which it does, permeate the entertainment world, not just Hollywood, but all of it, which it largely does. To permeate academia, even elementary and secondary schools, which it does. And then we notice that the same ideology we find in kind of unexpected places. We find it in sports teams, the women's soccer team, the NFL. We find it, we talked on the podcast a few days ago, at the Salvation Army. The good old bell ringers, they're too issuing proclamations, comical and ridiculous proclamations, but proclamations nevertheless, about fighting racism, I guess, in the world of philanthropy. And so our institutions, one by one, seem to have succumbed, seem to have collapsed, seem to have given in. And all of this has happened pretty rapidly. I mean, not quite as fast as the Taliban's takeover of Kabul, to be sure, but with that kind of breakneck speed. Now, I want to trace how this revolution came about, because in some ways it is a testament to the tenacity, to the organizational determination, the dogged insistence of the left over really a period of 100 years. And I raise the question because, in a sense, I'm asking whether we, who want to contest this revolution, undermine it, push it back, block it, do we have this kind of tenacity on our side? Now, all of this goes back to the early part of the 20th century when the Marxist revolution never came to be. And so the Italian communist Gramsci talked about the need for the left, for the Marxists to take over the organs of culture and take over what Gramsci called bourgeois culture. But for Gramsci, this was just something he wrote in the prison notebooks. Nobody really paid all that much attention. It wasn't until the 1960s that this notion of the long march through the institutions became serious business. In the 1960s, though, it was kind of disorganized, and all the different groups were pushing their own agenda. So the feminists were pushing the feminist line of thinking. And then you had the kind of race argument, which was moving alongside it. And then there was gay liberation. And these were parallel tracks, but they weren't the same track. You didn't have a kind of coherent ideology. And second of all, there was a lot of emphasis, even in the 60s, on the idea of the proletariat, the working class, the idea of using race and gender, yes, but also class. What's happened now is you can almost say that the Gramscian stage was the birth of woke ideology. The 60s was its kind of infancy. It became a kid, it became a teenager. And now it has reached maturity, which is to say it has reached adulthood. These same Marxist themes, but they're now transposed. Very little talk about the working class, very little talk about unions. It's all race, class, gender, sometimes climate change thrown in there. But all these causes are now merged. They're not separate tracks at all. They're a single track in which each of the different, it's almost like different rivers are coming together into one giant current, and all the different mini currents are pushing the current along, dragging the rest of us with it. And the left's goal is nothing less than to take over everything. This is, in fact, I think it was Mussolini who first used the phrase totalitarian, and he used the phrase as a positive term. For Mussolini, a totalitarian state was a good thing. You wanted the state to take over everything. Why? Because the state then represented a kind of unified, singular dedication to what Mussolini saw as the public good. The public good contrasted with the individual kind of selfish goods. And this is how the left thinks. They want their virtue. Their revolution, after all, no less than the French Revolution, is the revolution of virtue. Virtue defined in ways that may be unrecognizable to you and me, but as they see it, virtue, it's conformity. We are going to make you be good. We're going to make you, in a sense, blend your individual will with the general will. This is their goal. And they're going to take it through the cities, through the courts, through the military, through all the institutions and all the agencies. It's taken about, as I say, a century. And now they have arrived. We're not going to overturn this in a day. It's not going to be, oh, there's some parents who are revolting in Fairfax County, Virginia, and that's going to be it. No, I think what we need on our side is a blueprint. And we need a pathway, and we need a long-term strategy for, if not recapturing these wayward institutions, creating institutions of our own. We need to show the same kind of persistence and dedication and long-term view of the matter as the left has. It took them, as I say, a great deal of effort to get to this point, and it will take us a great deal of effort to get where we want to go.